Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a little work to my Coffman clamps, both the original right clamp and the mini right clamp. And these clamps are designed to hold kit or scratch building parts together at a 90-degree angle when gluing them together. I've had these clamps for years and they've been a huge help when assembling kits. The adjustable jaws are lined with foam pads that hold the parts together firmly without damaging them. I recently went to use the mini right clamp on a small shed I created years ago and recently cast in resin, and I realized that after all these years, the foam pads had begun to disintegrate. I contacted Randy over at Coffman Clamps, and for just a few dollars, I was able to get 2 sets of self-adhesive foam pads for both clamps. I figure it couldn't hurt to have an extra set for each clamp. Okay, we've got our foam pads from Coffman. Now let's get some cleaning supplies for the clamps. I had most of these supplies here, but like the foam pads I just ordered, can't hurt to have some extras on hand. We started off with a bag of 4/0 steel wool, a stainless steel mini brush set for mechanical scrubbing, then some Goo Gone, which would probably work to remove the old adhesive foam pads, and finally a can of Goof Off, which I kind of think of as extra strength Goo Gone. A pack of 3M ultra fine sanding pads, really similar to Scotch-Brite scouring pads for the kitchen. And finally, a rotary tool with an assortment of brass cleaning and polishing pieces. I bought a 60-piece set of these last year and have been just looking for a reason to try them out. It's down to the actual pad removal now. I started with my Excel hobby knife to slice the majority of the pads off the brass. Next, I dug in with one of the little stainless steel mini brushes, and of course this did remove more of the old pad, but having almost no patience, I went right to the rotary tool. While this removed even more material, I then had a thought. Why not just take the clamps apart and give them a really thorough cleaning? Taking the clamps apart is really simple. Remove the screw from the end of the clamp with a Phillips head. This screw is held in place with a nut that sits inside the brass rectangular section. Just be careful not to lose this nut. Then, spin off the knurled nut and washer to separate the clamp sections. Repeat for the other side of the clamp and we're all ready to clean. I decided to try the Goof Off first as it had been years since I used it and I was kind of curious about it. The last can I had separated on me after years of sitting. Now if you do try the Goof Off, just be careful when using it as it is flammable. I figured I'd give both the brass and aluminum sections of the clamps a bit of a bath. By the way, I picked up the Pro Strength version of this, and I've heard that this can discolor plastics. No problem for this project, but something to keep in mind. Here's the larger clamp section that had a lot of the old pad material stuck to it, and I like the results I'm seeing here. Now, even though I just needed to clean up the brass section for the new pads, it's actually relaxing doing this kind of thorough cleaning. Once all the pieces have been scrubbed with the Goof Off, I gave all the pieces a good spray with alcohol to remove any of the Goof Off residue and to ensure the new self-adhesive foam pads would stick well. While having clean tools doesn't mean your kit building will ultimately be any better, having clean tools just makes me happy. Plus, when working in the smaller scales, working cleaner is always a good idea. After letting all the pieces of the clamps air dry, now we get to add the new cushioned foam pads. Pretty straight ahead here, just take your time and line the pads up properly to the brass sections. Once you have both pads on, then it's a quick process to put the clamp back together. Just line the brass rectangular piece up to the aluminum section, carefully slip the nut into the end of the brass, and then slowly screw it back together. To make it easier on yourself, just make sure that you keep the brass parallel to the aluminum as you screw it together so you don't accidentally cross-thread the nut. Once that's done, slip the washer and the knurled nut on the other screw. Now just do the same on the other side of the clamp and you're all set. I'll do this again on the larger clamp so you can better see the process. Of course, this really is straight ahead. The big thing is, again, to keep the brass parallel to the aluminum and don't apply too much pressure to the screw if you feel any resistance. You just don't want to cross thread the nut here. Again, add the washer, screw on the knurled nut, the right way around of course. Do the same on the other side and you're finished with your right angle clamps. Good as new. Now let's actually use our freshly cleaned up Coffman clamp with its new cushion pads installed. I'll put together two sides of that little resin shed, and I do mean little. The long side of this shed is just about 1 inch long. Now it's just a matter of lining up your sections so they're nice and square. The more often you use the clamps, the quicker you get at it, of course. The best part is there's no adhesive on the sections at this point, so you can take your time and get it right. There's nothing worse than applying glue and then trying to square things up. I'm working with a new camera here and looking at an external monitor for framing. I goofed and I missed the application of the epoxy. I'll get better with this camera. After I applied the epoxy from the inside corner of the clamp, I further adjusted the pieces and a bit of epoxy squeezed through. I used a toothpick here to spread a bit of the epoxy along the lines of the wood so it'll blend in perfectly once painted. About 10 minutes later, I popped the shed out of the clamp, and as you can see from the cutting mat marked with 1 inch squares, it's a perfect right angle. Now you'd have an awfully tough time doing this by hand without the clamp. Whenever I sit down to work on models, I find it much more enjoyable to work with clean tools, and I often end up with cleaner results. I'm glad we could share this process with you. Thanks very much for joining us here at Raildig, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please help us grow the channel with a thumbs up and give that subscribe button a click. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon in the next video.